And Rosalind, you want to talk about, again, it's probably about 10 seconds from 2010. It's not necessarily the moment that lost it, because there were lots and lots of reasons, but what do you want to talk about?
Of course, the how could we forget Bigot Gate from 2010, which sort of completely shaped, you know, Gordon Brown's moment, which was just a terrible PR moment, I think, for him, and something that we have not seen in this election, certainly.
Absolutely. Let's have a look.
6 months.
You
can't
say anything about the immigrants because you're saying that but all these Eastern Europeans what are coming in, where are they flocking from?
A million people come from Europe, but a million British people have gone into Europe. You do know there's a lot of British people staying in Europe as well, and you're wearing the right colour today. It's a disaster. Well, just... Okay. Should never have put me with that woman. Whose idea was that?
I didn't see.
It's Sue, I think. They're just ridiculous.
I'm not sure if they'll go with that one.
They will go with it.
What did she say?
Oh, everything. She's just a sort of bigoted woman.
I mean, that would never happen now, because there's no way any spinner or PR person would ever allow the microphone to remain on.
Of course, it was a real thick of it moment, actually, that one. And, you know, his interaction with Duffy was just the huge talking point of that election, and we have not seen anything like that here. And I think, as you say, it's very careful now, and it's very planned. And
can I tell you a story about that? When that happened, because I was watching it on the television monitor as it happened, and we could hear Gordon Brown saying that. Initially, we weren't going to use it because there was a debate about whether you could use something which Gordon Brown wasn't aware he was saying. And what it tells me, I think, is nowadays we think, of course we're going to use it. It would be on social media within a few seconds. But actually, the rules of the game, the media have changed now. Everything is fair game and everything will be used and nothing is off limits, which is probably why, in part, the parties have just hunkered down and are just not going to give anything.
What would you, Kelly, what would you...
I think my moment was when David Cameron was out campaigning and you had that very interesting guitarist singing his very eloquent song to David Cameron. I found that sort of amusing.
Let's have a listen. Let's have a watch.
Back to Eton with all your recent chance. Back to Eton. Back to Eton.
It didn't last for very long because, I mean, we saw the PR person, or what do you call them, a political aide, go up to the guitarist and get a bit cross and try and stop the whole thing, and obviously that didn't work. But what would you pick out?
I picked out David Cameron saying that he supported West Ham. He pretended to support West Ham when in fact he usually pretends to support Aston Villa. Both teams who play in claret and blue, different cities, but there you go. Every politician has to pretend to support one football team, and unfortunately there were two who were quite similar in the Premier League at that point.
He could have gone for Burnley as well. Let's have a listen and a watch.
You can support Man United, the Windies and Team GB all at the same time. Of course, I'd rather you supported West Ham.
You've said, I think, before that to govern is to choose. Do you choose West Ham or do you choose Villa?
Sorry, I had what Natalie would describe as a brain fade. I'm a Villa fan. I don't know what happened to me. I must be overcome by something this morning. But there we are. These things sometimes happen.
So I live with a family of West Ham supporters. There is not a moment ever in their lives ever where they would mix up their football team with another because they're wearing the same colours. I mean, you support the Conservatives, Claire. You're going to vote for them. You know, in the scheme of things, that is nothing. What does that tell you about David Cameron, if anything?
Well, I don't know much about football. I imagine that you would normally remember. You'd normally remember who your favourite team was, I would think.
Yeah.
But I think what we ought to start to really concentrate on is the employment data is so much better than it was. Let's get back to actually what actually matters to people.
Do you think that is cutting through to people?
Well, I hope it is, but I'm just appalled at some of the Radio 4 are going around various constituencies, one a day at the moment. But the general level of ignorance. I mean, most of the people you've interviewed seem to think that Boris is Prime Minister, as far as they
Well, I mean...
Why don't they care? Why aren't they interested? Are they too comfortable?
No, it's because people have got other things going on in their lives. I think they generally don't engage with politics. They're busy with their family, busy with...
But we've got a situation where we've got the Russians in British airspace. You know, that's fairly critical, isn't it?
But in a way...
Don't people care about that?
Well, yeah, but in a way that's kind of an obligation on us in the media, I think, in the way we communicate with people. And I suspect people like me, very often, we communicate in a language and we have assumptions which are simply not part of people's everyday vocabulary, and so they tune out. So we have to kind of relearn our political language, I think, is part of it. I mean, I remember not so long ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, down in somewhere south of London, I can't remember, Gravesend, and I was in the community centre, and Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, and I was talking to these perfectly, you know, well-educated, informed women at the community centre, and they thought Tony Blair was Prime Minister. Now, what that to me was like a reality check, that people's level of interest and knowledge and engagement in politics is so far back from, you know, the political classes that we have to re-gear, because people don't know all the little details and every minutiae which we assume they do. I think that is the difficulty. I think it's up to us to try and talk in a way that they can understand and are interested and engaged in.
I mean, there are women in Saudi Arabia who can't get in and drive a car. There are women in this country who've flung themselves in the past under racehorses in order to get the vote.
I think it's unfair to say that women aren't, you know, interested and engaged in politics, but as you say, they're not being spoken to, and their policies are not addressing the concerns that women have in this country. And of course, like, there will be, I'm not surprised that there, you know, maybe I always think that they're interested in politics, but as you say, they're not being spoken to, and they're not being addressed.
A couple more comments here. Mrs. Coles on email: I'm a 77-year-old woman who's fed up and bored and confused during this campaign. I agree, it's like a marathon. I stopped listening after the 7-way debate. I will vote for the party I've always voted for. And Mrs. Coles doesn't tell us who that is. Dawn has texted on 61124. MPs are meeting a very different public this time, out in the real world, for such a long campaign. You can see the change in the way politicians are behaving. They're being forced to come down to real life level. And Peter in Cornwall says, fed up with hearing about personalities when what I want to hear is policies. It's boring. I mean, you know, there's masses of coverage about policies. It's not very hard to find out about policies if you really want to. Right, before you go, Norman, it's time for What The?